behind. Only 2% of climate finance is currently directed toward nature-based solutions to climate change, when these solutions actually generate multiple dividends in terms not only of greenhouse gases, but also of resilience of ecosystems, biodiversity conservation, and above all, livelihood and social equity. In this panel, I will be joined by Her Excellency Eve Bazaiba, Vice Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Minister of Environment. I will also be joined by Her Excellency Andrea Mesa, Environment and Energy Minister of Costa Rica, and Ms. Inger Anderson, Executive Director of UNEP. I have also been informed that we have that His Excellency Minister Malik Amin Aslam, Minister of Climate Change for Pakistan, has also just joined us. And he is equally high-level champion for forest finance. I'm very honored to be moderating this panel to discuss opportunities, concrete examples, and perspectives for achieving forest protection at scale and for unlocking high-quality emission reductions from forests. And in the second part of this panel, we will also be discussing the gaps in financing, what is needed for to mobilize and scale up private and public finance and transition towards a sustainable forest finance architecture that is also cognizant of the needs of the peoples and the stewards of these forests. I would like to kick off this panel with a question to Inger Anderson, UNEP Executive Director and Undersecretary General. Inger, in the late 2019, a new coalition was forged, co-led by the UN REDD program. That coalition proposed a public-private effort to mobilize funds to pay for at least 1 gigaton of high-quality emission reductions and removals from forests per year by 2025. This is known as the Green Gigaton Challenge. On November 2nd, just a few days ago, we also saw that a bit more than 100 countries signed the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests, and donors announced a funding pledge in the orders of billions, if I'm not mistaken, around 12 billion of public finance and some 7 billion of private finance. With these announcements and pledges, can we consider that the mission is accomplished? And are we on firmly on track towards the 2030 goals? Inger, please.
Thank you, Mireille, and it's quite remarkable. Mireille is in Nairobi, so just so that you know, so this is truly hybrid. At any rate, thank you very much. No, mission is not accomplished. Look, some of us are old enough that we were in New York in 2014 when we signed the New York Declaration on Forests. Some of us are old enough that we remember the Bonn Declaration and the Bonn goals for forestry. So each of these are a brick in the road, and we have to treat them as such, but the work is not done. But I salute the fact that we have these pledges made just the other day. Pledges are great. We would like to see now the actual color of the money and this money moving to communities. That's actually what we need to see. And let's remember this, that finance for forests is not about the trees. It's about the people, it's about the communities, it's about the biodiversity, it's about the global weather, and yes, it's about the trees, but it's about everything, because trees are part of the whole story, right? And so having these 105 signatories, having this money being put on the table is really great. But Glasgow is not the end of the journey, and frankly, friends, some of us are old enough to remember 1992 when there was discussions about having a convention on forests. So now I'm dating myself. So look, we are pushing on this issue because forest matters. And I'm sitting next to someone who will be speaking, but forests in all its shapes matters. Dryland forests, savanna forests, high tropical forests. We need to take care of them all because they matter greatly to the people and to the nature and the services that they provide. So I think we have to say that achieving the Green Gigaton Challenge is a critical milestone, but we have a long way to go. The financing and the delivery will be what we need to look at. And it's not just a gigaton that we are removing by 2025, it's a gigaton every year that we have to remove, right? That's the way we're going to make this happen. The journey is never over. And what we do need to understand is that today it's not going in the right direction. So having nice meetings and giving nice declarations and big pledges, we salute it. But actually the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And we need to restore forests, which is why we at UNEP have been very pleased to see some initiatives around the world, and we will hear about that. We've also been very pleased to see the launch of the Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, which enables the whole world to push in this direction, because that really matters. When it comes to money and finance, predictability, reliability, upfront, not always after, because it's hard for communities to do post facto, although there has to be some incentives for post facto, but also a whole established machinery that secures the rights of the people who live in these areas. So I think we've learned a lot since we began on UN Red, but we still have a long journey to go, Mireille. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Inger. It would be a shame for me to summarize what you've just said, but thank you so much for the challenge, for raising some of the key issues, and for flagging indeed that this is a step on the way, and that indeed implementation is where it matters. And on that point, I would like to turn to Her Excellency F. Bazaiba, Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Environment of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Votre Excellence, ça me fait un grand plaisir de vous adresser aujourd'hui. I will ask my question in English. I know that there is interpretation available, and I will then offer a translation of your response to the audience who does not have access to the interpretation, live interpretation. Your Excellency, we have heard about how investing in forests can lead to multiple benefits, and I think DRC is one of those cases in point where forests are so essential for the water flow of the Congo Basin, for the livelihood of 60% of the population of the country, for the mega biodiversity that the country harbors, including okapis that we cannot find anywhere else, including bonobos and other species. However, your country is facing significant development challenges that need solutions in the short term. And these challenges have been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted not only efforts to address the climate and biodiversity crisis, but also efforts towards providing better well-being for your people. So I would very much like to hear from you, how is DRC planning to respond to the development challenges in a way that is compatible with the preservation of forest ecosystems? Do you think that increasing levels of forest finance will help? And what has been your experience and lessons that you could share with countries and partners that would be interested?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Je souhaiterais d'abord féliciter l'UNRED et les programmes PUNA ainsi que tous les partenaires qui sont ici, les collègues ministres du Pakistan, Costa Rica et tous les partenaires européens qui travaillent avec nous, et surtout pour ces panels très très importants. Alors, en ce qui nous concerne, comment répondre aux défis de développement d'une manière compatible avec la conservation des écosystèmes, nous voulons d'abord refixer les idées pour parler de l'importance actuelle des forêts dans l'humanité. Alors, la République démocratique du Congo, au sein du bassin du Congo, le bassin du Congo qui dans l'ensemble a plus de 268 millions d'hectares de forêts tropicales humides qui jouent un grand rôle pour nous permettre à atteindre l'objectif d'atténuation de la température mondiale à 1,5 degrés Celsius. Et la RDC, au sein du bassin du Congo, a plus de 60% de ces forêts. Donc, nous avons un potentiel. Ce potentiel environnemental renvoie la République démocratique du Congo à une responsabilité de la gestion durable, rationnelle, responsable de ces forêts. Alors, pour bien gérer ces forêts, nous devons aussi fixer les idées pour savoir que la forêt constitue toute une vie. Il y a des gens qui vivent dans la forêt et avec la forêt. La forêt, c'est notre garde à manger. La forêt, c'est là où nous tirons toute la survie, l'éducation, la santé, parce que la pharmacopée, les médicaments, c'est dans la forêt. Le meuble que nous utilisons, c'est dans la forêt. La nourriture, c'est dans la forêt. Les cultures que nous faisons, c'est dans la forêt. La forêt nous accueille à la naissance avec notre berceau, nous accompagne toute la vie et nous enterre avec le cercueil. Alors, si vous nous demandez de ne pas faire pression à la forêt, de ne pas utiliser les bois de chauffe comme énergie, il faut une compensation. Il faut donner les moyens alternatifs pour permettre à préserver la forêt. Le moyen par excellence, c'est l'accès à l'énergie. Et là, ça demande des fonds. Et l'expérience que nous avons aussi, il faudrait absolument que les pays industrialisés, là je m'adresse au G20, dont l'Europe fait partie, devons savoir que tous les fonds qu'ils devront mettre pour permettre à la préservation des forêts ne constituent pas les fonds à donner aux pays pauvres et l'aide au développement. Ça constitue un investissement qu'on donne pour lutter contre le réchauffement climatique. C'est un enjeu important. Il faut avoir l'équilibre entre les fonds présentés et les besoins de la population. Nous avons besoin d'améliorer notre agriculture, ne plus brûler les forêts. Il faut nous donner l'alternative, la technologie. Nous avons besoin des infrastructures qui nous permettent à ne plus nous référer à la forêt pour la survie. Parce qu'il y a aussi un autre point que je dois souligner, que la population propriétaire des forêts et gardienne des forêts ne soit pas considérée comme un danger qui détruit la forêt. Que cette population-là soit considérée comme gardienne par excellence de cette forêt. Elle n'a que besoin de l'éducation, de sensibilisation, de renforcement des capacités pour avoir les méthodes nécessaires pour protéger les forêts. Elle a besoin de l'information. Que signifie réchauffement climatique? Comment on doit se comporter pour que nous puissions lutter contre le réchauffement climatique tout en demeurant dans le développement. L'expérience que j'ai, par exemple, dans notre pays, pour montrer comment il y a compatibilité entre la population et les forêts et la biodiversité, à 300 km déjà de la capitale du Congo, en Beaumontour, dans la province de Mai-Ndombe, les territoires de Bolobo, nous avons la population qui elle-même, sans financement, a compris qu'il y a la biodiversité qui disparaît dans la forêt parce qu'avec la culture sur brûlure, la coupe des bois, des arbres, les animaux fuient. On n'a plus rien. Et on a compris qu'il y a le décalage, les dérèglements climatiques. Les pluies ne viennent plus comme il se faut. Alors qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Nous devons procéder au reboisement. Nous ne devons pas laisser à la nature de se reboiser elle-même. Ils ont accompagné avec ces programmes la protection des bonobos. Il y a des familles de bonobos qui ont accru là-bas. Et puis il y a la forêt qui est redevenue dense. La population protège elle-même. Pourquoi? Parce que les fils de ces coins qui ont étudié, qui étaient au département de l'environnement, les universitaires, sont venus apporter l'information à cette population-là. Donc, en résumé, je vous dis, pour que nous préservons nos forêts, pour les besoins de nous-mêmes et de l'humanité, il faut des moyens et des moyens conséquents qui ne doivent pas être de petits moyens de surprudage comme l'aide au développement, mais des investissements importants qui permettent à sécuriser la forêt. Et enfin, ne pas considérer la population comme étant un danger contre la forêt, mais plutôt la population comme étant la protection de cette forêt. Merci beaucoup.
Merci infiniment, Excellence. Ça serait, encore une fois, je ne vous ferai pas honneur en résumant toute votre intervention. Ceux qui vous écoutent en ligne ont eu l'opportunité d'avoir l'interprétation. To those who are in the room, and particularly our esteemed panelists, I will do a very, very succinct summary of Her Excellency's intervention. First of all, thanking the UN REC program and everyone else for this event, and starting by reassessing how we think about the importance of forests. Forests are fundamental for biodiversity, for water, but they are beyond everything. They are the source of food, they are the source of medicine, and they are the source of furniture. Also for the communities that live within and depend on these forests. Her Excellency used a very interesting example of saying people of the Congo are born in the forest, and the forest is also their grave. So from cradle to grave, the people of Congo depend on this forest and cannot be considered as the enemies or as the pressure on forests, but rather the custodians of forests. And this is why any response that is proposed should first off be financed at scale in terms of investments to respond to the needs of the population and to make sure that they are provided with alternatives. And second of all, as a call to the G20 member states, Her Excellency calls for climate finance not to be considered as ODA or charity or sprinkled funding left and right, but rather as structural investments that will help the communities and population address their needs, all the while preserving and protecting the forests. Votre Excellence, j'espère que ceci nous permet de couvrir succinctement ce que vous avez mentionné. And on that point, I would like to now turn to Pakistan, to His Excellency Malik Amin Aslam. You are one of the champions for forest finance. Can you tell us what has been the role of forests in Pakistan's economic recovery to COVID-19? And more broadly, what has been the experience of Pakistan in mobilizing finance to conserve and restore its forests? We would very much like to hear from you about building forward greener.
Thank you very much.
They just... Oh.
Yes, okay. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about forests in Pakistan. In Pakistan, over the last 5 years, we've seen that we need to work with nature. If we are to develop along sustainable pathways, we need to make nature an ally of development rather than an adversary. Because if you begin fighting with nature, that's a fight you never win. And that's a fight that can really put you off track in terms of your mainstream development also. But on the contrary, when you invest and when you trust in nature, nature starts paying you back in ways that you cannot even imagine. And forests are, I would say, at the forefront of the solutions that lie in nature. Pakistan was a country where we had forests going down. We were a country which was deforesting. But then we came out with a vision to not only arrest that, but to go in the opposite direction and start afforesting Pakistan. So we started this dream project that we had called the Billion Tree Tsunami Project in one of our provinces. And this started in 2014. And when we started investing in that project, all the money was coming from our own pocket. We were not going to any partner. We didn't go to any multilateral bank for the money for investing in forests, because we believed this is the right thing to do. And we stepped forward and started planting the trees and protecting the forests. There were 4 main lessons that we learned in 3.5 years of that investment. One was that we really had to have zero tolerance for tree cutting and what was called the timber mafia in that province at that time. And that zero tolerance had to be politically backed. And we had a number of incidents, and one of them I vividly remember is that there was a Twitter feed which said that forests were being cut in one part of Pakistan, which is the northern part. There was snow over there, very inaccessible. And we sent a team, and they checked, and they found out that, they gave us a bureaucratic reply that, no, these are old trees, they've been cut 5 years back. But the next day, again, I got the same feedback from somebody who was sending it on Twitter. So when I sent it to my now Prime Minister and then party chairman, he said, just get a chopper and let's go there. So we went there and the trees were cut. But on that day, we took a decision. We took a decision to suspend the Department of Forestry right from the lowest rank to the highest rank. And that was a message that sent shivers into the whole system. And after that, suddenly, things started changing in that province. It was a watershed moment. The forestry people knew we meant business. The lot of politicians and bureaucrats who were feeding off that timber knew we meant business. And within 1 year, that province for the first time started importing timber. So there was no timber to be bought in the market because it was not being cut. So these sort of signals are very important. Number 2, we learned that you need to have total transparency and credibility if you are to go out and plant forests. Because when you do that, you get the money and financing, and for that financing to keep on flowing, you need to have credibility of what you're doing. You need to make sure the forests are surviving. And that credibility comes in through a third party. Government can keep on saying we planted so many trees, nobody's going to believe you. We got the WWF to do a performance audit, a yearly performance audit of that project against the wishes of the government, because governments don't like to be audited by private parties. But we did that, and that created the credibility and the transparency for that process to go forward. Number 3, the lesson was that forestry, anything you do with forestry, and I agree with the Honorable Vice Prime Minister who talked about, people being born and dying in those forests. These are the people who are going to save the forest. You need to get the communities, the local communities involved in forest protection. Unless they become real owners of that forestry process, it will not happen. So that was the third lesson. We made it very people-centric. And the fourth and final lesson that we learned in this whole process was that it has to be flexible. So the plan has to be flexible. So you just can't say that I'm going to plant this type of forest in this land. We kept it flexible. For instance, assisted natural regeneration, which is the best, most effective way of protecting forests by involving the communities, was about 40% when we started. When it ended, it was 70% of our plan. So these were the 4 lessons we learned. About the money, where the money is coming from. So far, the money was coming from our own pocket by the government of Pakistan. But now we have partners coming in with multitude of innovative financing options available. I was just coming out of a meeting with the Asian Development Bank, who were talking about what they called a policy-based lending. So they want to give us the next pot of money because we planted these forests. As a benefit of these forests, we get the money at a concessional rate. So don't worry about the money. Go out and plant the forest and protect it, and you'll get the money. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you very very much, Your Excellency, for these sharp lessons that you're sharing with us, and which join to some extent the intervention we've just heard from Her Excellency Ebba Zaiba. I would like now to turn to Her Excellency Andrea Meza, Environment and Energy Minister of Costa Rica. This is a very interesting mix of portfolio in terms of executive power. And Costa Rica has been a poster child for turning the tide on deforestation since the early 80s through policies and mechanisms such as payment for ecosystem services and results-based payments. You have pioneered one of the very first schemes to support forest conservation, water-based watershed management as well. And recently, Costa Rica has also received results-based payments from the GCF. These are the very principles under which UNRED was formed, and these efforts have been recognized recently, with Costa Rica being one of the winners of the Earthshot Prize. I think a lot of countries would very much like to hear from you what they can learn in terms of mobilizing results-based payments for forests, and combining those and making sure that these results-based payments are actually ensuring livelihoods and are sustainable. Considering the current political landscape, do you still think that such models can still work? Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you to UNEP, and it's great to be sharing the panel with these two leaders here in the conservation of forests as well. The lessons from what we have been doing in Costa Rica, well, it's that we started to give and recognize the value of nature long time ago. This is, I think, the critical aspect and element here. We developed this payment of environmental services scheme more than 20 years ago. We acknowledge that forests generate a lot of services to the society, and that we need to pay for those services generated to the society. And we put a tax on fossil fuels, and from 3% of the tax that we're charging to the fossil fuels, we allocate those funds in a forestry fund, and in that way we manage to pay to the different landowners of the forest. Sometimes are private landowners, other times are communities, indigenous communities. And in this scheme, we have been managed to develop a system that it is very aligned with transparency issues, as the minister mentioned before. It's very important that we can be monitoring that they are protecting the forest, that the forest is there, and in that way we can be paying for those services that they are giving to the society. If we take a look during these years, we know that 75% of the contracts that we have go to small and medium-sized properties. This means that in many times these resources are the only income that some of these families receive. In the case of indigenous communities, for example, we have been identifying that they are reinvesting these resources in other needs that the communities have, investing in water supplies, investing in other aspects that they need, because they are guaranteeing that they are protecting the forest, and with that money that they are receiving, they're doing and covering other social and economic needs that they have. Now that we have the system very well designed, with the monitoring, with transparency, with third parties, external parties, doing a lot of the monitoring of all this, with all these, we have a clear inventory of the forest mass of the country, and this has allowed us then to try to see if we can access to the resources, Green Climate Fund, for example, and here we applied to the window of results-based payment, and we managed to mobilize more than $50 million last year coming from that window. That then we are allocating that again in the forestry fund to continue doing this
this kind of payment of ecosystem services. We have also mobilized another $50 million coming from the Carbon Forestry Fund of the World Bank. So last year, we basically mobilized more than $100 million for that. And it became in a very good time because of the pandemic. The income that we were receiving from the fossil tax was reduced because the whole economy had an impact. So for us, this really was, this came in a very precise and good time. We are now trying to develop new figures of payment of environmental services, because we know that there are other services that are generated also coming, for example, from soil practices to restore soil, to restore land. And that we should be also trying to generate what we are calling the new generation of payment of environmental ecosystem services. Also, if we can give value to what is happening in mangroves, which is also very important as well, and that we also need to be restoring mangroves. So we are right now discussing this new generation of payment of environmental services, because we have understood that it's not only to have our conservation areas, it's to do a landscape management, and that we need to continue working with the different farmers. And if they implement practices to restore their soils, they are also doing a lot of carbon capture. This is something we are analyzing, and other ecosystem services that they can be also implementing. So this is a little bit where we are right now, and that it's critical that we have good MRV systems. This is very important. We're using technology now also, which is because this with MRVs, it makes it cheaper, and to also have a robust financial mechanism that it is transparent and that also guarantees that all these resources really goes to the different families. We have been benefiting almost 30,000 families in the country, and normally are poor families all around the country. So I think that this is part also of the nice story of all these payment of environmental services.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I absolutely love what you said. Essentially, this is forest conserved by the people and for the people. Very, very fundamental point. I will now kick off our next round, which is to be focused on transitioning to a global forest finance architecture. However, in the interest of time, and considering that some of you have already covered some of these aspects, may I kindly ask you to limit your interventions to no more than 2 minutes, and I will kick off with His Excellency Malik Amin Aslam. Your Excellency, you have talked about how investment with domestic resources actually draws investments and funding and finance by others. Could you let us know your thoughts about what is needed to address the huge finance gap to conserve and restore the world's forests? Do you think that private finance provides some of the solution? And if so, are there any concerns, and what can forest countries do to access this private funding? You may choose to focus your response on part of the question as you would prefer.
Yes, you got it? Okay. Okay, yes, thank you very much. And I think forest finance is something that has to be spearheaded by public finance. We cannot leave it to private finance, although private finance can come in and trigger some of the things. But it is a mode of finance that needs innovation. For instance, in Pakistan, we are now trying 3 different modes of innovation, all in forest finance. First one is the green bond, which is a bond which is linked with forestry, and it gives you access to lower capital finance. That is possible. We have issued our first green bond, but that was for renewable energy, but we are hoping to do one for renewable energy, for forestry also. The renewable energy one went for about $500 million, oversubscribed 6 times. But it got oversubscribed because there was a green image of Pakistan, which was built on forests. So I think that helps. The other one is a blue bond, which our colleague just mentioned on mangroves. And for that, we've already done a natural capital valuation for the mangroves and the sea grasses, which are underwater, to give it a dollar value. And once we have that, we can then go to the market to get capitalization. That's what we're doing. The third one is the most innovative one, which is called a nature performance bond, which is trying to link debt reduction or debt relaxation with nature performance. And the nature performance is coming from forestry. So, the quantification of that nature performance is being linked with, financing modes that could come from a debt relaxation or a debt reduction. We are already in dialogue on that with three countries, and it's moving in a very positive direction. So all of these three are available. And now we have this, I've just heard over here about the IMF SDRs and them getting linked to forest financing or nature financing. So that's another mode which is available. So, my summary is that these are all innovative instruments asking you to do out-of-the-box thinking. So it's not just saying, give me $1, I'll put it in trees. It's doing it in a very innovative fashion. So, keep your eyes and ears open and you'll get the money for forestry.
Thank you infinitely, Your Excellency. And indeed, seeing the big movers such as the IMF in that space is a very good signal. I will now turn to Her Excellency F. Bazaiba of the DRC, and reflecting again at what we've heard already over the first couple of days at COP. We heard that more than $1 billion will be made available for the Congo Basin. Do you view this amount as being sufficient for the needs of the DRC, let alone other countries of the basin? And can we hear your views on that with respect to the investments that you've mentioned?
Oui, merci beaucoup pour cette question importante d'accès au financement parce que le grand défi que nous avons est celui-là. Il y a eu beaucoup de promesses et nous sommes aujourd'hui à la COP26. Nous ne voulons pas que lorsque les travaux vont se clôturer le 12 novembre, que nous rentrions encore rien qu'avec des engagements et des promesses. Il faut qu'il y ait des actions concrètes. Bon, au niveau du bassin du Congo, nous sommes en train de récolter petit à petit les fonds. Il y a mon pays, le président de la République a signé avec le Premier ministre Boris dans le cadre de l'initiative CAFI qui est prévue pour un engagement de 10 ans, mais jusque-là, il y a eu l'engagement avec 500 millions qui ne répond peut-être pas à ce besoin parce que le besoin de notre CEDEN, c'est 48 milliards. 19% de ces fonds, c'est conditionnel, il faut qu'il y ait des financements et 2%, c'est notre propre engagement, c'est ce que nous avons déjà commencé. Mais nous disons qu'avec les fonds CAFI, avec tous les autres fonds qui viennent, c'est une contribution appréciable et nous en appelons à tous les autres partenaires de mettre la main donc, dans cette contribution-là par rapport au fonds d'atténuation et d'adaptation pour que nous puissions lutter contre le réchauffement climatique. Et j'insiste que ces financements, c'est un financement dont le retour est garanti dans le secteur d'énergie. Nous cherchons même les partenaires privés pour INGA, pour les centrales hydroélectriques. Nous avons besoin de ceux qui vont investir dans la transformation locale de nos minerais stratégiques, les cobalt, les lithium. Ça va aider à atteindre l'objectif d'atténuation. Nous avons besoin de la transition écologique. Là, la RDC est une réponse. Nous avons besoin de financer l'agriculture pour donner l'alternative à l'agriculture sur brûlis. C'est aussi une réponse que nous avons au niveau de la République démocratique du Congo. Donc, nous demandons qu'il y ait beaucoup de moyens, qu'on le mette, des moyens d'investissement solides, durables, pour atteindre les objectifs de développement durable. et non aller dans les fonds de développement, n'est-ce pas, qui n'amènent pas au développement.
Merci infiniment, Votre Excellence. To those of you who are in the room, next to Her Excellency, a short summary again. Her Excellency highlighted that the NDC of the DRC is costed at over $40 billion, not just in terms of climate change mitigation, but equally adaptation, and that the investments that have been signaled in the forest sector recently, His Excellency, the President Felix Tshisekedi has signed with the UK Prime Minister an agreement for $500 million for the next 5 years. However, this funding is not sufficient. As DRC presents itself as a solution country, as a country bearing solutions for minerals that are essential for the energy transition, a country that has a huge hydro potential, a country that has also forests and peatland, they are calling for investments at scale rather than that can support transformation locally and generation of green jobs locally and income locally, so that they can meet both their development challenges and low carbon transition. With that, I would like now to turn once more to Her Excellency Andrea Mesa. Andrea, could you tell us what has been your experience on prices and conditionalities? You have mentioned MRV, you have mentioned the results-based payments mobilized from the Green Climate Fund and also from the Carbon Fund. Can you tell us how what has been your experience on prices, conditionalities, and how can your example inspire a global transition for effective forest finance, considering, for instance, that you have 75% of your beneficiaries who are smallholders, and therefore you may have a high transaction cost in making sure that funding is reaching them. Over to you, please.
Thank you. First, I think that we really need to raise the voice when we're coming from the countries with forest, that forest cannot continue to be seen as the cheap solution. It is very important to see in the whole climate finance architecture and discussions that we are seeing that in many of the different funds, we just recognize $5 per ton. Why? Why just $5? It should be, and we need to recognize that we're talking about other services, not only capturing carbon, sequestration of carbon. It's about generating water. It's about protecting biodiversity. So we really need to raise our voices and see and acknowledge that forests cannot be seen as the cheap solution. Why in other carbon transactions of carbon offsetting, sometimes you pay or recognize $70 for a carbon unit. And so this is one element that I think it's very important, because when we also want to do the MRVs and these other elements, there are a lot of conditions that, because they say this is a risk investment, sometimes we don't know if we're going to be having the forest in the future, so there should be buffer zones, there should be a lot of aspects that can make these operations with a lot of transactional cost that at the end doesn't allow us to use that money in forest conservation. So I think that it's very important to understand that, yes, to do the MRV, to start negotiating, sometimes there are a lot of other costs that are there that should be also considered, and that for this reason we should be also making the case that nature cannot be seen as the cheap solution for the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And last but not least, turning now again to Inger. Inger, you have said that we are aiming for a gigaton on a recurrent basis. And that will be a challenge, whether we like it or not, but we need to start somewhere. What do you think are the policies and incentives that could be put in place to catalyze this transition?
I think that you've heard it just from the three ministers. And I think we've heard it really very well. Political will at the highest level, community buy-in, clearly, rights. Let's be very clear. This is not carbon that belongs to the government. The people who use these lands have rights, and part of the revenue that comes to the country must go to these rights without any political strings attached. And an exploration of a variety of deals. It's amazing to me to think that 25 years ago in Costa Rica, you had the foresight to have farmers farm water. You paid them to protect the upper watershed so that your cities would have water. Now that's foresight. And today we know that every second and a half, we lose the equivalent of one soccer field of tropical forest. Every second and a half. And so there are forces at play that we cannot put the blame at the door of that country. It will take the finance, because wherever I sit, I need those forests. This is my air too. And that's why the equity in finding the finance, the equity in ensuring that the price is right, the political leadership that we see from this panel here, and the absolute determination to turn this around. But look, my friends, we've been here before. 2014, 1992, there are a number of promises have been made. So let it be said that in COP26, 100+ leaders came together and made a pledge on forest for financing and for protecting. Let it be said that this time it's going to happen, because this time we have learned a lot. We've learned about the various modalities of funding, we've learned about the political leadership, we've learned about the rights, and we've learned about the transparency in the MRV dimension. But we've also understood that it's in everyone's interest. And we've understood that we can no longer let it wait. So I would like to say that these fantastic ministers here are showing real leadership, and we from UNEP, we certainly will do all that we can to support. And a warm thanks to our host, Luxembourg, for being very kind and generous in supporting this, this work and being part of the Voices for Change. Thank you.
Inger, and to all my panelists, thank you so very much. I will not do a summary. Inger, I think you have summarized our event today very well. I would just like to ask for 2 more minutes of your time and invite Mr. Yunsik Park, the Secretary General of the 15th World Forestry Congress, to tell us a little bit about the next steps, one of the bricks in that wall, Inger, as we go towards the World Forestry Congress in 2022 and beyond. Secretary General, please.
Yeah, thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Park Eun-sik, and I'm the Secretary General of the 15th World Forest Congress Secretariat. It is my great honor to be here with you and to have closing remarks. This week we have seen many good news, such as the leaders' declaration on forest and land use, and the global financing forest pledge. And I'm very pleased because I am a forestry guy, so forest has been put at the forefront of the climate solution. More than 100 of the world leaders have committed to halt and reverse the forest loss and land degradation by 2030. In addition, the public and private donors have pledged financial support for forest actions. As a member of international community and a host country of the 15th World Forest Congress, the Korea already expressed its support for the commitment and participate in the global financing pledge. I believe today's discussion has been fruitful and productive and will contribute to the development of the forest finance. Year 2022 will be the significant to continue all these discussions, deepening the ambitions and seeking the tangible outcomes. As Inge said, we are in the journey to hold the forest laws and biodiversity laws, but today's discussion is not end, I think. Today's discussion is not all of our effort. So under the main theme, building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forest, the 15th World Forest Congress will emphasize reversing forest laws and the role of forest in addressing the global environmental crisis. In line with today's discussion, we will focus on the forest financing from the public and private sector at the high-level dialogues and the ministerial forum during the Congress. As a host of the 15th World Forest Congress, in the collaboration with the FAO, the Korea will take a role of promoting inclusive discussions to overcome climate crisis and to strengthen the partnership among all stakeholders. I believe the World Forest Congress can serve as a great platform to share and encourage the ambitious ideas which have been presented today. So Korea Forest Service wishes all the distinguished speakers and excellencies to take a part in this meaningful event to share and deliberate the next step and expand actions and beyond. Lastly, I'd like to express sincere appreciation to UN-led, making an opportunity to strengthen our efforts toward financing forest actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Thank you very much to everyone, our distinguished panelists. We have a little bit over 40 questions to you online. However, in the interest of time, our team of moderators has been responding to those. We very, very warmly thank you for the focused and concise and informative responses and interactions that we've had today, and wish you a very, very fruitful negotiations in Glasgow for the remaining time of the COP. Thank you infinitely.